The conference room aboard Neutral Station Gamma 7 was built to impress. Tall ceilings stretched overhead, and the walls gleamed with polished metal that reflected the stars outside. Ambassador Velkith of the Ashari stood near the wide window, her translucent skin shimmering with soft blue light. She was nervous, though she tried not to show it. First contact with a new species was always delicate work. The humans arrived exactly on time. Commander Sarah Chen led the group, walking with confident steps that made no sound on the metal floor. She was shorter than Velkith expected, with dark hair pulled back tight and eyes that seemed to notice everything at once. Behind her came 4 others, including a young officer with the name Webb printed on his uniform. "Welcome to the Galactic Council," Velkith said, spreading her long fingers in the traditional greeting of peace. "We are honored to meet your people." Sarah smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "The honor is ours, Ambassador. Earth is eager to join the galactic community." The pleasantries lasted 10 minutes before Captain Zroth of the Korthax arrived. He was massive, nearly 8 feet tall, with scales that looked like armor and teeth that could tear through steel. The Korthax were warriors proud and fierce, and Zroth made sure everyone knew it. He walked to the head of the table without asking permission and sat in the largest chair. "So these are the humans," he said, his voice like rocks grinding together. "Small, weak-looking. Your planet has no real defenses, no weapons that could threaten a single Council warship. Yet you come here making demands?" Sarah's expression never changed. "We come here seeking fair treatment. Earth may be new to space travel, but we're not asking for charity. We offer trade, culture, and knowledge. In return, we expect to be treated as equals." Zroth laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the walls. "Equals? You've barely left your own star system. The Korthax have conquered 100 worlds. We fought wars that would turn your oceans to steam. What could you possibly offer us?" "Respect," Sarah said quietly, "and the chance to avoid making an enemy you don't want." The room went silent. Velkith felt her skin flicker with alarm. No one spoke to the Korthax that way. They were the Council's military strength, the species that kept order through force when diplomacy failed. Insulting them was dangerous. Zerath stood slowly, his chair scraping across the floor. He leaned across the table toward Sarah, close enough that she could probably smell the meat on his breath. "Careful, little human." In Korthax culture, such words require a response. "In human culture," Sarah said, not moving an inch, "threats require one too." Lieutenant Webb, the young officer standing behind Sarah, tensed. Velkith noticed his hands curling into fists. The other humans shifted their weight slightly, and suddenly the atmosphere felt different. Dangerous. Zerath must have felt it too, but he misunderstood what it meant. He thought they were afraid. "Your species needs to learn its place," he said, and his massive hand shot out faster than Velkith could track. It struck Webb across the face with a crack that made everyone flinch. The young officer went down hard, blood already pouring from his nose. He hit the floor and didn't move for a moment. In Korthax culture, this was normal. The strong dominated the weak. The weak submitted. Order was restored, but Webb didn't submit. He got up. Slowly, blood streaming down his face, his eyes unfocused from the concussion. And something in those eyes made Velkith's skin go cold. "Marcus, stand down," Sarah said, her voice sharp with command. Webb didn't seem to hear her. He looked at Zroth, and Velkith saw something she'd never witnessed before in an intelligent species. Pure, focused rage. Not the hot anger of a child or the cold calculation of a predator. This was something primal, something that had been sleeping in human DNA for millions of years. Zerath smiled, showing all his teeth. "Your warrior wants to." Webb moved like lightning. His fist drove into Zrath's elbow joint with surgical precision, and the sound of breaking bone cut through the air. The Korthak's captain roared in pain and swung with his other arm, but Webb ducked under it and drove his shoulder into Zrath's midsection. The impact sent them both crashing into the table. Two Korthak's guards rushed forward. They were trained warriors, experienced soldiers who'd fought in dozens of battles. Webb took them both down in seconds. He moved with a speed and ferocity that shouldn't have been possible for someone his size, someone who moments ago had been concussed and bleeding. One guard tried to grab him. Webb twisted, broke the guard's grip, and delivered a strike to the throat that sent the warrior gasping to the floor. The second guard pulled a weapon. The Webb was already moving. He grabbed the guard's arm, twisted it until something snapped, and the weapon clattered away. Through it all, his face never changed. Blood still poured from his nose. His eyes were wild but focused. He looked like a machine built for violence, running on something darker than logic. "Marcus!" Sarah's voice cracked like a whip. "That's enough." This time, Webb heard. He stepped back from the groaning guards, his chest heaving, fists still clenched. Slowly, something human returned to his eyes. He looked at his commander, then down at his bloody hands, and seemed almost surprised by what he'd done. Zrath lay on the floor, cradling his shattered arm, staring at Webb with something that might have been fear. "We're leaving," Sarah said, her voice calm despite the chaos. "And I think we're done with negotiations for today." As the humans filed out, Webb walking unsteadily between two of his teammates, Velkith stood frozen. In 30 years of diplomatic service, she'd never seen anything like it. The young human had been injured, outmatched, facing opponents twice his size with military training. By every logical measure, he should have submitted or been killed. Instead, he'd nearly killed them. After the humans left, Velkith made her way to the station's data archives. She had to understand what she'd just witnessed. The search took hours, but eventually she found Earth's history files, the ones the humans had provided as part of their introduction package. What she read made her scales tingle with cold understanding. Humans had a word for what Webb had done. They called it berserk rage. For millions of years, when cornered or threatened, human bodies could flood themselves with chemicals that blocked pain, increased strength, and turned off fear. It was a survival mechanism, one that let them fight predators much larger and stronger than themselves. Most species had evolved past such things. They'd become civilized, diplomatic, and peaceful. They'd learned that intelligence was better than aggression. Humans had kept both. And they'd learned to use rage like a weapon, sharp and terrible. Velkith began writing a report to the council, but her hand shook as she worked. The words felt inadequate for what she needed to say. She settled on something simple and true. "We have made a terrible mistake," she wrote. "We treated the humans as if they were like us. They are not. They are something much more dangerous. They are survivors who have turned their oldest, darkest instincts into tools. And we have just made them angry." Research Station Kepler 442 floated in the void like a flower made of metal and glass. Dr. Amara Okonkwo pressed her hand against the observation window, watching the purple nebula twist and dance in the distance. After 3 months aboard the station, she still found it beautiful. Worth leaving Earth for, even if it meant working under Galactic Council oversight. "Dr. Okonkwo, the spectral analysis is complete," called Chen Wei from across the lab. The young physicist grinned as he gestured at his screen. "You were right about the hydrogen emissions. This is going to change everything we know about star formation." Amara smiled. Science was the same everywhere, whether you were human or Ulendi or any of the dozen other species working on the station. The pursuit of knowledge needed no translation. The station administrator, a Ulendi named Sortel, drifted past on his hovering platform. The Ulendi had no legs, just a long body that ended in delicate tentacles they used for fine manipulation. Sartell's skin showed patterns of contentment, which was his default state. The Ulendi had never known war. For 3,000 years, they'd lived in peace, building universities and libraries instead of warships. "How goes the research?" Sartell asked, his voice soft and musical. "Excellent," Amara said. "Another few weeks and we'll have enough data to publish." She never got those few weeks. The alarm started screaming at 0300 hours. Amara jerked awake in her quarters, heart pounding, reaching for her tablet. The screen showed warnings in multiple languages, all saying the same thing. Unknown ships approaching. Multiple vessels. Moving fast. By the time she reached the command center, Sartell was already there, his skin flickering with patterns of distress. On the view screen, a dozen ships closed in on the station. They were ugly things, cobbled together from parts of other vessels, covered in weapons and scars. "Ravagers," Sartell whispered. "They're raiders. Pirates. Can we fight them?" Amara asked. Sartell looked at her with confusion. "Fight? No, we surrender. It's the only logical response. They'll take what they want and leave. Fighting would only cause unnecessary death." The Ravagers boarded within 20 minutes. They were a mixed species group, outcasts and criminals from a dozen worlds. Their leader was a massive creature with 4 arms and a face like melted stone. He spoke through a translator that made his voice sound like grinding metal. "All personnel to the main hall. Now, anyone who resists will be killed." The station's population filed into the central gathering space. 300 people of various species, scientists and support staff, all looking terrified. The 15 humans clustered together near the back. Amara counted them quickly. A research team plus a few engineers. No soldiers. No weapons. Just scientists who'd come to study stars. The Ravager leader addressed them with casual cruelty. "Your station is now our prize. We'll take everything valuable, including some of you. The young ones will fetch good prices at the slave markets. Cooperate and die quickly if we decide to kill you. Resist and die slowly." Sartell stepped forward immediately. "We surrender completely. Take what you need. Just please, don't hurt the children." The station had a small school for the children of researchers. 32 kids of various species, including 3 human children. The Ravagers began separating them from their parents. Screams echoed through the hall as parents were pushed back and children were dragged forward. One of the Ravagers grabbed a small Ulendi child, who cried out for her mother. The mother tried to follow, and a Ravager struck her hard enough to break bones. She collapsed, still reaching for her child. Something inside Amara snapped. Later, she wouldn't remember making the decision. She just remembered moving. Her fist connected with the Ravager's throat, and the creature dropped the child, gasping. Amara grabbed the little Ulendi and passed her to Chun Wei. "Get the kids out of here." "All of them? How?" Chun asked, his eyes wild. "I don't know yet. Just move." The other humans understood without needing explanation. Maria Gonzalez, their xenobiologist, grabbed a piece of broken equipment and swung it into a Ravager's face. James O'Connor, quiet James who studied radiation patterns, picked up a maintenance tool and brought it down on another Raider's weapon arm. Chaos erupted. The Ravagers expected submission. They expected logic and self-preservation. They didn't expect prey that fought back. Amara's team scattered through the station, taking the children with them. The Ravagers pursued, but the humans knew the station better. They used every advantage they had. In the maintenance tunnels, they rigged chemical tanks to explode. In the docking bay, they sabotaged 3 Ravager ships. In the hydroponics lab, Maria used nitrogen to freeze the deck, sending pursuers sliding into walls. Amara found herself in the environmental control room with 5 other humans and a dozen children. They had no weapons except what they'd improvised. Outside, Ravagers hammered on the door. "We can't hold this forever," Chun said, his voice shaking. "We don't have to," Amara said. She was staring at the environmental controls, an idea forming. A terrible, dangerous idea. "We just have to make them regret coming here." Over the next 6 hours, the 15 humans waged a war that should have been impossible. They used the station itself as a weapon. They vented atmosphere in sections where Ravagers gathered. They overloaded power conduits to create electrical traps. They contaminated water supplies and poisoned air filters. Every system they'd spent months learning to maintain, they turned into instruments of destruction. But it was more than that. It was the way they fought. The Ravagers were experienced warriors, but they'd never faced opponents like this. The humans didn't care about odds or logic. When cornered, they didn't surrender. They got angry, and angry humans were unpredictable, vicious, and utterly relentless. James O'Connor died holding a corridor so children could escape. He took 6 Ravagers with him, fighting with his bare hands when his improvised weapon broke. Maria Gonzalez spent 4 hours crawling through maintenance shafts with a broken leg, still laying traps and creating chaos. Chen Wei locked himself in the reactor room and threatened to overload the core if the Ravagers didn't back off. They believed him because by then, they'd learned that humans didn't bluff. When the rescue ships arrived, responding to the distress signal Amara had managed to send, they found something unprecedented. The Ravager fleet was shattered. Half the ships were damaged or destroyed. Of the raiders who'd boarded, more than 60% were dead or injured. 13 humans had survived. 2 had died. But every single child was safe. The rescue commander, a Krell named Harkin, stared at the carnage in disbelief. 15 scientists did this? Against trained raiders? Amara sat on the deck, covered in blood and bruises, cradling a sleeping Yulendi child. She looked up at Harkin with exhausted eyes that still held fire. "They tried to take the children," she said simply, as if that explained everything. And somehow, it did. The footage from the station's security cameras spread through the galactic network within days. Every species with access to the feed watched it. They saw humans improvising weapons from laboratory equipment. They saw humans fighting with injuries that should have been incapacitating. They saw humans choosing to stand and fight against impossible odds, not because it was logical, but because something inside them simply refused to submit. The Galactic Council couldn't ignore it anymore. They dismissed the incident at Neutral Station Gamma 7 as an anomaly, one soldier losing control. But this was different. This was scientists, researchers, peaceful people who'd come to study stars. And when pushed, when their young were threatened, they'd become something terrifying. Ambassador Velkith watched the footage alone in her quarters, her skin cycling through colors of fascination and fear. She'd spent months researching humanity, trying to understand what she'd witnessed. Now, she had more data, and it only made the picture clearer. Humans were dangerous, not despite their emotions, but because of them. Rage made them stronger, faster, more resilient. Fear didn't paralyze them, it focused them. And when protecting others, especially children, they became absolutely unstoppable. She began writing another report, but the words felt heavy with implication. The galaxy had learned something about humanity at Kepler 442. The question was, what would they do with that knowledge? And more importantly, what would humanity do when they learned how the galaxy saw them now? Ambassador Velkith stood in the rain on Earth, and for the first time in her diplomatic career, she was doing something completely unauthorized. The Council hadn't approved this visit. They didn't even know she was here. But after Kepler 442, after watching footage of human scientists turning into warriors. She needed to understand. The military base stretched across rolling hills. Buildings painted in shades of green and brown. Soldiers moved with purpose across the grounds, their movements precise and controlled. Commander Sarah Chun, who'd led the first contact mission, had agreed to host her visit. The human woman approached now, wearing a uniform that looked worn from use. "Welcome to Fort Bragg, Ambassador," Sarah said. "I'm surprised the council let you come." "They didn't," Velkith admitted. "This is unofficial. Personal research." Sarah smiled, a real one this time. "Good. Then we can be honest with each other." Over the next 3 weeks, Velkith embedded herself with a human military unit. She watched training exercises that seemed designed to push bodies beyond their limits. She saw soldiers carry heavy packs for miles, simulate combat scenarios where they were outnumbered, practice fighting while exhausted and injured. Why? She asked the training instructor, a scarred woman named Sergeant Rodriguez. Why train your body to function under such extreme stress? Rodriguez looked surprised by the question. Because that's when it matters most. Anyone can fight when they're fresh and ready. We train to fight when everything's gone wrong, when we're hurt and scared and the odds are against us. That's when you need your training to take over. But the training was only part of it. Velkith also attended lectures on human military history. She learned about battles where outnumbered forces had held impossible positions. She read accounts of soldiers fighting through injuries that should have killed them. She studied human warriors from every culture and every age, and found the same pattern repeating. Humans didn't retreat easily. They didn't surrender when logic said they should. And when pushed far enough, they could tap into something primal that made them dangerous beyond any reasonable measure. One evening, she sat with a combat psychologist named Dr. Marcus Klein. He was an older man with kind eyes and steady hands. "You want to understand rage," he said, not asking. "Yes, my species abandoned such emotions millions of years ago. We became peaceful, logical. Most galactic species did. But humans kept it. Why?" Dr. Klein leaned back in his chair. "Because it works. Let me explain how human rage actually functions. When we experience intense threat, especially to loved ones or our own survival, our bodies release massive amounts of adrenaline and other chemicals. Pain tolerance increases by 40 to 50%. Strength output jumps by 10 to 40% beyond normal. Time perception changes, making everything seem slower so we can react faster. But you lose fine motor control," Velkith said. "Your decision-making becomes impaired. In some ways, yes. But that's not the full picture. We lose fine motor control, but gross motor skills actually improve. We can't thread a needle, but we can hit harder, run faster, fight longer. And our decision-making changes. It doesn't vanish. We stop overthinking. We focus on the immediate threat and respond with pure, efficient aggression." Velkith's skin flickered with fascination. "Your species weaponized a survival instinct. Better than that. We learned to control it." Dr. Klein pulled up footage on his tablet, showing soldiers in training. "Watch this. See how they enter high-stress scenarios? Their bodies start producing adrenaline, entering a modified rage state. But they're not out of control. They still work as a team. They still follow orders. They still make tactical decisions. How is that possible? Thousands of years of cultural evolution. We built systems to channel rage productively. Military training, martial arts, sports. We taught ourselves that rage is a tool, not a master. The best human warriors can enter that state at will, use it when needed, and step back down when the threat passes. Velkith spent hours watching footage of human conflicts. She saw soldiers charging machine gun positions that should have been certain death. She saw medics working through injuries to save others. She saw units that refused to retreat even when vastly outnumbered. And in every case, she saw the same thing. Humans fighting harder when things got worse, not weaker. One night, she asked Sarah the question that haunted her. "Aren't you afraid of it? This rage? It seems so dangerous, so hard to control." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "Of course we're afraid of it. Rage has driven humans to do terrible things throughout our history. Wars, massacres, cruelty beyond measure. But fear isn't a reason to suppress something. It's a reason to understand it, to control it, to choose when and how to use it. Most species chose to evolve past aggression entirely, and that's fine for them. But Earth is a hard world, Ambassador. We had predators that could kill us in seconds. We had diseases, natural disasters, and ice ages. We survived because when everything went wrong, when death was certain, we got angry and fought anyway. Rage kept us alive long enough to become intelligent. And then intelligence taught us to keep rage on a leash." Valka thought about this as she prepared her report. But before she could finish it, news came that changed everything. A message from deep space, broadcasted on all frequencies. The hierarchy was coming. The hierarchy was old, ancient, even by galactic standards. They've been expanding slowly for 10,000 years, adding system after system to their empire through overwhelming military force. They offered the same choice to every species: submit completely or be destroyed. In 10,000 years, every species had chosen submission. Their fleet had just entered human space. The message was simple and had been delivered to 100 worlds before. Surrender now. Comply with hierarchy rule. Those who resist will be eradicated. Valkith watched Sarah read the message. The commander's face went very still, very calm. It was the same expression Valkith had seen on humans before they fought. Not fear, not even anger yet. Just cold certainty. "You'll surrender, won't you?" Valkith asked. "The hierarchy has 1,000,000 ships. Earth has barely left its own solar system. Fighting them would be suicide." Sarah looked at her with eyes that held fire beneath ice. "The hierarchy just threatened to destroy our homeworld. They threatened human children, human families, everything we've built. You've been studying us for weeks, Ambassador. You've learned about human rage. So let me ask you a question. What? Do we look like a species that responds well to threats?" Valkith's skin went pale with understanding. The humans weren't going to surrender. They were going to fight. Against impossible odds, facing certain death. They were going to fight. And suddenly, she knew with absolute certainty that the hierarchy had made a catastrophic mistake. Within hours, every human government was mobilizing. There was no debate, no argument about whether to fight or surrender. The response was instant and unanimous. Earth's fragmented nations unified under a single banner for the first time in human history. They called it the Terran Defense Coalition. The fleet Earth launched was pathetic compared to the hierarchy armada. A few hundred ships, mostly converted civilian vessels with weapons hastily attached. But Valkith watched the humans prepare and felt her certainty grow. The hierarchy had faced thousands of species. They'd fought wars across galaxies, but they'd never fought anyone like humans. They'd never faced prey that became predators when cornered. They'd never learned what happened when you threatened a species that had survived by refusing to give up. Refusing to submit, refusing to die quietly. The hierarchy thought they were conquering another primitive species. They thought this would be easy. Valkith began broadcasting urgent messages to the Galactic Council. Send help to Earth. Send ships, weapons, anything. Not because the humans need saving, but because if they fall, we're next. And because the hierarchy is about to learn something that 10,000 years of conquest never taught them. What's that? The council chair asked. That some species don't submit. Some species get angry. And angry humans are the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. The first hierarchy ships entered Earth's orbit 3 days later. The war for humanity's survival had begun. And the galaxy was about to discover what happened when you made humans truly, deeply, righteously furious. The hierarchy fleet hung above Earth like a steel storm. 500 ships that blotted out the stars. On the bridge of the flagship, Overlord Caxton reviewed the tactical display with bored efficiency. Another primitive world to conquer. Another species to add to the empire. In 10,000 years, the pattern never changed. "Send the final demand," he ordered. 1 hour to surrender or we begin orbital bombardment. His aide hesitated. "Overlord, the humans have sent a response. Already? Most species take days to accept their fate." "What do they say?" The aide's translator struggled with the human words, then settled on a simple translation. "They say no." Caxton felt something he rarely experienced. Surprise. Explain. "They refuse surrender. They say we can try to take Earth, but they'll make us pay for every inch. They say they'd rather die free than live under tyranny." The aide paused. "They've also said something else. They said, and I quote, 'Come and get it.'" Around the bridge, hierarchy officers laughed. Caxton allowed himself a thin smile. Defiance was rare, but not unheard of. It never lasted long. "Very well. Begin the attack." The human fleet rose to meet them. Barely 200 ships, primitive things with weapons that seemed cobbled together from civilian technology. The hierarchy sensors counted missiles, railguns, and crude energy weapons. Nothing that could threaten their shields. The battle began with textbook precision. Hierarchy ships moved in formation, targeting human vessels with practiced efficiency. The first human ship died in seconds, torn apart by focused fire. Then the second. The third dot, then everything went wrong. A human destroyer, already crippled and burning, didn't retreat. Instead, it accelerated directly toward a hierarchy cruiser. Collision alarms screamed as the destroyer slammed into the largest ship at full thrust. Both vessels exploded in a fireball visible from Earth's surface. What was that? Caxton demanded. Why didn't they eject? Unknown, Overlord. Analysis suggests it was intentional. Before he could process that, it happened again. A damaged human frigate, dead in space with half its systems failing, suddenly roared to life. It positioned itself between the hierarchy fleet and a cluster of human evacuation ships, then detonated its reactor core. The explosion caught 3 hierarchy destroyers, damaging 2 and crippling 1. Commander Sarah Chung watched the battle from the bridge of the Terran flagship Defiance. Her face was cut, blood running from a gash above her eye, but her voice was steady. "All ships, remember the objective. We're not trying to win. We're trying to hurt them enough that they think twice about coming back." "Captain, we're being hailed by the hierarchy flagship." Her communications officer reported. "Put them through." Caxton's face appeared on screen. His features twisted with confusion and anger. "What are you doing? Your ships are engaging in suicide attacks. This is madness." Sarah smiled, and it was not a kind expression. "This is rage, Overlord. You threatened our home. You threatened our children. Did you really think we'd just roll over? You cannot win. For every ship of ours you destroy, we have 10 more. This is illogical." "Logic?" Sarah's laugh was harsh. "You came to our world expecting us to be logical? Let me tell you what humans do when threatened. We fight, we adapt, and we make sure that even if we lose, you remember us forever." She cut the transmission and turned to her crew. "All ships, Pattern Omega. Hit them with everything we have." The human fleet changed tactics. They stopped trying to fight defensively and went completely aggressive. Ships that were damaged didn't retreat for repairs. They found hierarchy targets and rammed them. Pilots who lost life support didn't abandon ship. They flew manually until their oxygen ran out, still firing. Marines who boarded hierarchy vessels fought room by room, refusing to surrender even when surrounded. The hierarchy forces had superior weapons, better armor, more ships. But they'd never faced an enemy like this. Human pilots flew damaged craft that should have been floating scrap. Human gunners kept firing from stations exposed to vacuum. Human ships exploded themselves as weapons when conventional attacks failed. And the humans kept talking. On every frequency, through every channel, they broadcast messages. Stories about their history, about Thermopylae and Stalingrad and Iwo Jima, about times when humans had faced impossible odds and fought anyway. They weren't just fighting a battle. They were fighting to make sure the hierarchy understood what they'd awakened. Caxton watched his tactical display with growing disbelief. His fleet was winning by any objective measure, but the humans were making them bleed for it. Every destroyed human ship took at least one hierarchy vessel with it. Every boarding action cost dozens of soldiers. This wasn't a battle. It was a meat grinder. Fall back to defensive formation, he ordered. We'll bombard them from orbit. Before they could move, space rippled and new ships appeared. Hundreds of them, bearing the marks of the Galactic Council. Leading them was Ambassador Velketh's flagship. This is Ambassador Velketh to all ships. Her voice rang across the void. The Galactic Council formally recognizes Earth as a sovereign world under our protection. Hierarchy forces are ordered to withdraw immediately. Caxton felt rage building. The Council has no authority here. This is hierarchy territory. No, Overlord, Velketh said calmly. It isn't. Not anymore. We're done watching species fall to you, one by one. Earth stands, and we stand with them. The combined fleet of humans and council ships regrouped. The hierarchy still outnumbered them, but the equation had changed. Caxton ran the calculations. He could win, but it would cost half his fleet. Against an enemy that fought like humans, refusing to surrender. Turning every ship into a potential bomb. For the first time in 1,000 years of service. Overlord Cax then made a decision no hierarchy commander had made before. All ships withdraw. We're leaving this system. Sarah watched the hierarchy fleet retreat, and her legs nearly gave out. They'd done it. Against every odd. Despite the losses, they'd made the hierarchy back down. Casualties? She asked quietly. 78 ships destroyed. 12,000 dead. Another 5,000 wounded. A tactical officer's voice cracked. But we held the line, Captain. Earth is safe. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. 12,000 dead. 12,000 people who'd refused to surrender, who'd fought knowing they probably wouldn't survive. 12,000 examples of what humans became when protecting their home. Later, in the aftermath, Ambassador Velketh addressed both the Galactic Council and Earth. The chambers were packed. Every species watching, trying to understand what had happened. For 10,000 years, Velketh began. The hierarchy has expanded through overwhelming force. They offered submission or death, and species chose submission because it was logical. Because resistance meant certain destruction. Today, that pattern ended. Not because humans had superior weapons or numbers. They didn't. The hierarchy could have destroyed Earth if they'd been willing to pay the price. She paused, letting her words sink in. But that's the key. Humans made the price too high. They fought with such ferocity, such absolute refusal to submit, that even winning would have cost the hierarchy more than they wanted to pay. They turned every ship into a weapon. They fought through injuries that should have been fatal. They coordinated attacks while dying from decompression. They made it clear that conquering Earth would require exterminating every human. And even then, they'd make the hierarchy remember them. Thalka's skin cycled through colors of awe and respect. We've spent millions of years believing that evolution meant leaving violence behind. That civilization required suppressing our aggressive instincts. Humans teach us something different. They show us that sometimes survival means embracing what makes you dangerous. That rage, properly controlled and directed, can be the difference between extinction and freedom. She looked directly at Sarah, who sat in the audience. Humanity doesn't rage because they're primitive. They rage because it works. Because it kept them alive on a deadly world. Because it drives them to fight when fighting seems impossible. They've turned emotion into strategy, fury into focus, and desperation into determination. The council chambers were silent. Then, slowly, representatives from dozens of species began to applaud. It started quiet, then grew into something thunderous. Sarah stood and walked to the podium. Her uniform was still stained with blood, her face bruised, but she stood tall. The hierarchy will come back someday. Maybe not tomorrow or next year, but eventually. And when they do, they'll remember what happened here. They'll remember that some species don't submit, that some worlds are too expensive to conquer. She looked out at the assembled aliens, representing hundreds of worlds. Earth offers the galaxy a simple deal. Stand with us, and we'll stand with you. Face the hierarchy together. We're not asking you to fight like humans. We're asking you to remember that you have the right to say no. That submission isn't inevitable. That even overwhelming force can be resisted if you're willing to pay the price. The council voted that day. By overwhelming majority, they formed a military alliance, with human forces integrated throughout. Not because humans had the best weapons or the biggest fleet, but because they'd proven something the galaxy had forgotten. That sometimes rage and refusal were the most powerful weapons of all. In the months that followed, Earth's motto spread across the galaxy. It appeared on ships, stations, and worlds that had lived in fear of the hierarchy for generations. 4 simple words that captured what humans had shown them. We will not submit. And in the depths of hierarchy space, Overlord Caxton filed his report on the failed invasion. At the end, he added a personal note, one that would circulate through hierarchy command and change their strategy forever. The humans are small, primitive, and outnumbered. But they have something we've never encountered. They have rage, and they've learned to use it like a weapon. Conquering them is possible, but it would cost more than Earth is worth. Recommendation: avoid human space. There are easier conquests elsewhere. The hierarchy never attacked Earth again. And humanity, having earned their place in the galaxy by refusing to surrender, went on to become what they'd always been. Survivors who turned rage into strength, fear into focus, and threats into opportunities to show exactly why you don't corner a species that evolved by fighting back.